To the Overcoming Adversity podcast. I'm your host, Michael Allison. Today's guest is Jacq Delorme. He's a life coach and a public speaker, also an author. He's been through his own fair share of adversities. He was once in a car accident that struck a person. He had to live with that and face that. He's here to tell us about his story of how he overcame adversity. I can't wait to get into this conversation. Let's go. Jacques, thank you so much for being a guest on the Overcoming Adversity podcast, man. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Great to meet you.
Absolutely, man. Thank you, man. So the introduction led with you actually being in a car accident. And as I thought about that, I could imagine things just flashing in my head and reliving that. Can you take us through that day and what was that experience like for you, man?
It happened just over 2 years ago. It was October of 2021. I was on my way east in Canada on a major highway. So our speeds on that highway are upwards of 120 kilometers an hour, which for you is about 75 miles an hour. It's dark. It's a moonless night, a little more difficult to see. I'm going down the highway. I come around a curve, a little bit of a downhill grade to the right, and I never saw him in time to be able to get out of the way. Guy, a 24-year-old man on a pedal bike, was in the middle of my lane, and I had nowhere to go. I hit him straight center of my car. His body goes up, strikes my windshield, bounces up over, and ends up somewhere in the middle of the highway. So I pull over as best I can and turn on my hazard lights and call 911 to get ambulance and police on the way. I have my training in emergency first aid. So I ended up going back and seeing if I can find him to do some sort of help. Like I want to do something. He's in the middle of the highway, and with it being dark, it's really dangerous for me to try to go out there. So the 911 operator said, just stay put, wait for the police to show up and we'll block the highway and we'll get him some help. It wasn't 30 seconds later, a mid-size SUV comes around the curve and doesn't see him. And right in front of me, hits him, drives right over top of him. And because of laws of physics, when it passes over, they took him between the front tires. So he actually went underneath the vehicle, but there's not enough space for a human body underneath a mid-size SUV. So you hear the tumbling of the body and passes over. It launches his body about 7 feet in the air and about 50 feet down the highway like an arrow. Just laws of physics. Right? Just grabbed him and just darted him. Goes down the highway, lands, ends up stopping across the right-hand lane of the highway, and I'm in shock. I don't know what to think at this point. I start walking back to my car, and not 30 seconds goes by, another vehicle comes around the curve. This time it's a semi-trailer with a flatbed on the back, right? So comes flying by me. I'm waving, trying to get his attention, but he's never going to move in time to avoid the body. And he doesn't. He got him again. So he had my collision, the SUV, and a semi, all within the span of less than 5 minutes. So I eventually get back to my car and just sit, wait for the police to show up and try to figure out, what do I do next? And that's what started my whole journey of trying to deal with, what I end up now with, PTSD, and trying to deal with it on what I saw and what I heard on that night.
Wow. Okay. So let's unpack this story, brother, because that right there was a mouthful, man. And
yeah.
You to live such a traumatic experience, one can only imagine. And to be the person that collided with this person and then to see the after effects of it playing live in front of you is crazy. Can you tell us a little bit, man, seeing this, going through it, and now reacting to it, what was that like for you, man? In the span of 5 minutes, obviously coming down this road, you probably was coming from an event. You was probably heading somewhere.
Yeah.
not expecting any of this. What was that like, man? What was that like for you just mentally, emotionally, man?
The biggest thing that started to happen, the human brain, it's called the reptilian brain in your
Yeah.
mind, that's always designed to try to protect you. So it starts telling you stories and it starts doing things to help protect you from that same incident happening again. And the what ifs start happening. What if I'd pulled over for food and not been on the highway at that time? What if I'd seen him sooner? What if I'd got taken the risk, gone out and pulled his body off the highway before the SUV came? What if none of the what ifs make any pile of difference because I can't go back and do it again. It's just my reality now that what do I do? Go from the what if to the what now? How do I move on from what I just saw, what I just heard? The biggest piece I was finding is that there's the huge issue with my physical state because of what happened with that memory now embedded in my brain. Every time I get a trigger of any kind that takes me back to that memory, I have the same physical reaction I had the day of that incident. So I get the heavy feeling in my chest, in my solar plexus. I feel nauseous. I feel like I just want to escape and bury this whole memory as best I can and just get away from it and try and hide. That's a very typical of men too, as
Yeah.
well.
So as you were telling me that story, it brought me back to when I was in Iraq and I got blown up by a car bomb and I had to put my best friend in a body bag. And I struggled when it came to dealing with anything with death,
Hmm.
guns, you name it. Your experience of seeing that and going through that left you with PTSD. Can you talk a little bit about driving a car, getting in a car with somebody, driving down the highway, right? Going to stoplights, thinking about the next trip you got to take and all the precautionary things you got to take. Can you tell us a little bit about what was that like for you going through that after that?
Trying to drive was not terrible as long as it was during the daytime.
Hmm.
Because the accident happened at night, I drive to work in the morning, especially that time of year, quite early. I go to work at like 6:30 in the morning here, and it's dark.
Hmm.
So I'm going to work. Street lights helped, but anybody in dark clothing on the sidewalk, anybody on a bike, worse yet, triggered me. Like I'm normally at a state of about a stress level of 6 or 7 at a constant state. As soon as that trigger happens, instantly 10. And I just want to hide. I just want to get home and get away from everything and anything. Anything that triggers any sort of a stress response, I wanted no part of it. Somebody cutting me off in traffic just sends me into an anger, into a rage. It's
Wow.
just my response to that memory, right? Is I had a rage response for a while I had to deal with. And it's all related to that incident. Yeah.
Hmm.
So triggers
When,
were definitely an issue.
when the cops showed up and
Mhm.
they seen what you called them over the phone for, how did that play out?
That was an interesting conversation. It was a corporal that had come over. He's one of the bosses, obviously. He's the lead of his detachment. Their RCMP is what we have here on rural highways.
Hmm.
So he and I chatted, and I gave him a rundown of what I can remember on what happened. He's going, "There is nothing you could have done. And by the way, it's the second one we've had in less than a month.
Hmm.
Wasn't the first. It's happened before." When you actually come down to taking a look at more of the specific detail of it, I can remember exactly what the cyclist was doing right in front of me, right before the accident happened. Your brain works in a little bit of a funny way that in a split second, it will gather 10 times more information than it normally does. And it's almost like a freeze frame. I have
Hmm.
that freeze frame of that cyclist in front of my car, which is actually the cover of my book. That's the freeze frame I picture all the time with the accident. I can see him. He's not pedaling. He's not looking at me. He's looking down. He's coasting in my lane. What was he doing? He's committing suicide. We pretty much figured that out. He wasn't there by accident. He was waiting for me. Because why is somebody on a moonless night in the middle of a highway with no nearby town, no street lights, no nothing? Why is he there? Right?
That was my follow-up question. So, did you find out who this person was? Why were they there? And since you know that information, can you talk a little bit about, was there anything done afterwards in regards to this particular situation, knowing that this is the second time it happened on this highway? Did the cops or anybody try to do any intervention or intervene with this type of situation?
Okay. Do I know who he was? No. I have no idea who he is. The police won't release that sort of information. I've never found out who he is. All I know is where he's from and his age, and he's male. That's all I know. If police reports, like the media, never released my name or his name, was never released. So I have no way of finding out unless I do some really heavy searching. And at the end of the day, because of the nature of my mindset, the way that I was dealing with things, the last people I want to talk to are his family, because they will ask questions I can't answer. I don't know his mental state. I never talked to him. I've never seen him before. So does that help me, or does it help his family for us to ever talk? No. They'll get enough information from the police report to know what happened. But as far as his mental state, us saying it, we are 99% sure it's suicide is probably accurate based on what he was doing.
Right.
But at the same time, are we guaranteed that that was what it was? I don't know. And it's just, there's too many questions, and it's too much of a sensitive topic when somebody loses a loved one, that us meeting probably not a great idea. Have they ever done anything? Police haven't talked to me since. Like, it's nowhere near my home. It's 4 hours from where I live. Like, it's a long ways away. It's 240 miles away.
Wow.
I was able to get home by getting my parents to come get me because my car was undrivable. But I've only ever been through that area once since, and that was only 3 weeks ago. I actually was going to a funeral, my aunt's funeral in that city nearby. I actually drove through the accident scene almost 2 years to the day of when I was there. That was hard. At least it was during the daytime, which helped. It wasn't at night. I made sure of that. But it was tough going through there again with the memory of what had happened there 2 years earlier.
So I wanted to talk about how crazy anniversary dates are for people that struggle with PTSD, either prior to the day of or somewhere around those dates. We get those itches, those sensory things that start popping in our minds. I know that you had a transformation in your life. So can you talk a little bit, man, about what was that transformation like for you after facing this, but now you got to deal with it because you have so many memories, vivid memories of this?
Yeah. The biggest thing I started doing was to get out of the what if and get into the what now mentality, which is a lot of the life coaching outside of counseling. Counseling tries to get you from the actual incident to the present moment and trying to get you to stop reliving that moment, right? Life coaching takes you from your present moment into where you're going next. What's your future going to do? What are you going to do to move ahead and not stay stuck where you are, right? So that's where I looked at it and went, okay, what do I need to do to move on? And I started doing neuro-linguistic programming. That helped a lot with trying to get my central nervous system to calm down. I was getting such a bad physical response to what had happened. I needed to calm that down. I needed to stop reacting. So I started doing a lot of morning routine things like meditating, journaling, trying to go back and go, okay, here's what good things happened today, the bad things, and using that to see patterns and to be able to deal with the triggers that were happening. If I had a trigger, okay, how do I deal with that? How do I get my mind to rationalize, okay, so this doesn't have anything to do with the accident. Why am I taken back there? And try and create that separation between a past event and where I'm trying to go. So that helped a lot. It took a long time, little bits at a time. People I know in this day and age want it. They want it now. They want that healing to happen instantly. And they say, oh, I want that PTSD to be over. I'll do this for a couple of days and I'll be fine. It doesn't work like that. Mental health never works like that.
Right.
Each person's a little different. In your case, it could have taken years, yet you're somebody else who's also in the same incident, could take 6 months.
Right.
You don't know. Everybody's different, right? So I never looked at it from the perspective of what other people said. Social stigmas are interesting People are saying you're going to be off work for 3 months minimum. I was off work for 1 week. I was back because it was my safe haven. In fact, for me, I needed work, right? I needed a way of coping. Being at home alone doesn't help me. So I learned how to do different things to try to relieve that stress, to relieve those triggers, and learning how to do my morning meditations properly, how to do journaling, how to do affirmations, doing all those things that really help to calm my mind down so that I wasn't overreacting all the time.
I want to ask you, man, a lot of us have like survivor's remorse or guilt and things that's tied to some of these types of trauma. Can you talk about being in a state of forgiving yourself and getting past some things if you attributed any fault to yourself? How long did it take for you to actually get past this, knowing that you had to start implementing meditation, affirmation, journaling, and developing this habit and becoming much more disciplined with doing some of these things to get past this? How long did it take for you to actually develop that mindset of knowing that this was not my fault?
Yeah. The piece that helped the most was the fact that we figured out with the investigation by the police who checked everything that I remembered, everything checked out, every single thing. There's nothing I said that was off base from the evidence they'd gathered. So we were pretty much 100% sure it was a suicide based on what they know. And the fact it's happened before, the evidence was there. And that helped a lot to understand that I could not avoid what happened because he was going to make damn sure it did. He was coming off the edge of the highway at exactly the right time to make darn sure I couldn't avoid him because he wanted to die.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I hit him with the center of my car. Like he timed it perfectly. I had no chance. I couldn't. And he chose a spot in the highway, curve, downhill. So it's a little bit of a blind spot. He wasn't stupid. He knew what he was doing to make sure it happened. So that helped a tremendous amount with getting my mindset to understand that I could not have avoided it. So beating myself up over it wasn't going to do me any good. So then it came down to, okay, what next? How do I deal with the rest of it and deal with me on, okay, I can move forward from that now to deal with the stigmas, deal with the fears. It took me a long time to start telling people because I was afraid people will label me as a killer. Mm-hmm. That was probably the biggest issue. I spent the better part of 10 months really not telling many people. People at work didn't know. My boss knew because I was going to need to be away sometimes to get help.
Right.
But I never told my coworkers for almost a year because I couldn't. I was too scared of being labeled. I was too scared of the reaction I was going to get.
So you did get to that point of overcoming this adversity, and you had the chance and opportunity to put it in a book. Can you tell us a little bit about your book and what readers should get when they read your book?
Yeah. The book itself starts, the first 30, 40 pages are the actual accident itself in a lot more detail than what I gave. And even the fallout after the accident of ending up at the hospital and trying to get home. My mindset the entire first night, which was hell on wheels, to say the least, because it just happened. And I'm literally alone completely. Because it's later at night. I can't call, I'm afraid to call people. So it goes through all of those pieces, me getting home, trying to get another vehicle, put my life back together. And then a lot of the struggles of trying to get help from the healthcare system when it's difficult to get. There's so many people trying to deal with so many things. Getting help is not easy. So I ended up finding a couple of avenues. One was a psychologist. One was a life coach with neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. She helped a lot. And then from there, it was a lot of research on my own, trying to find what self-care strategies could I use. That's when I came across things like Hal Elrod's book, Miracle Morning, where I do a lot of things from that, led me into the meditation, the journaling, exercise, continuing with that, which is a normal part of my life already. But that's still, it was another piece I had to keep going and even do more of, because exercise is a great way to battle depression and anxiety. So I started doing all these self-help things, and I describe a lot of them in my book as far as here are the things that I find worked for me It might work for you. I can't guarantee it will work for someone else, but at least I'll tell my story saying, here's what I found worked for me to get through this, and trying to use that information to try to help others.
Absolutely. Speaking of helping others, so you've transitioned now to becoming a life coach and a speaker. Can you tell us a little bit more about the work that you're doing now, man?
So the life coaching piece is starting. I'm still fairly new at it. I've only had a few clients, but I'm finding that I like it a lot. I come from a teaching background. So from that perspective, I'm very used to teaching people how to do things. So I've started doing public speaking, things like this, podcasts. I work with Schizophrenia Society. Even though they are diagnosed mental illness, a lot of the recovery pieces are very similar. So I do public speaking with them here in Regina. I've done different engagements with people like the RCMP cadets, talking to police officers coming out of college and go, here's what my accident was like. Here's how you can then relate to me as somebody who's in the middle of a tragic event where, okay, here's the mental part of it from my side that you need to be aware of, right? And using that information to help them. And I've started doing more with libraries. I'm doing a school tour right away. I'm booking schools in to do some public speaking with them. So it's building, it's growing, which is good. My story's a little bit more unusual, so people tend to catch on to it fairly quickly and go, how the heck did you get past that? And they have a lot of questions. So, and it's, as much as it was a really gory thing to have to go through, it does definitely help to get out there and noticed.
Absolutely. I want to go back to a question before, something that you said. Trying to find someone that you connect with is extremely important when you've been through something like yourself. So how important is it to find the right counselor, the right life coach when someone is trying to get past a certain situation that has occurred in their life?
That is really important. Like, professional help really is needed. In some cases, your healthcare provider isn't going to give you a lot of money, depending, like for in Canada, we have psychologists, psychiatrists as part of our health plan at work, but it's not very big. Like ours is $400, but one session's $175. So it
Oh, wow.
runs out real fast.
Oh, wow.
So, but then you've got the public version of it. Like, you've got the healthcare system in Canada will give you sessions too, but it's so overloaded, you can't get in. So that's where you just try to find avenues where there's help you can get that's not going to cost a great deal. But at the same time, be careful of who you choose. Have somebody you can actually connect with and you are comfortable telling your story. If you're not comfortable saying it, you will tend to hold back, and it will take far longer to try and get the proper help. At the end of the day, communication is going to be the biggest key. And that's where my work going into trying to deal with men's mental health. Guys don't tend to talk, especially. Women tend to be better at it. They tend to be more emotional. Men have always been told in society, you suck it up. No, you just man up and you just deal with it. No, you'll be fine. Just man up. Unfortunately, that doesn't really help things. The suicide rate in Canada for male versus female is 4-1.
Wow.
80% of suicides in Canada are men. Only
Wow.
20% are women, right? So we're seeing that, and it's not getting better. So we know that trying to get people to talk is the starting point. Talk to someone, right? And then try and tweak that to be somebody you trust, somebody you can communicate with well to get help. But the big key is to just start talking to somebody. If you just bury it, you shove it down and you stick it into your gut and you just know, I'm never talking about this again, it's only a matter of time. You're a ticking time bomb, and it's going to at some point get really bad. And that's where some of the suicide rate comes from people not talking, and things just get to a point where it's unbearable, and they pay the ultimate price for it in the end.
Man, if you could expound on that and help us a little bit here, man. So for our listeners that's listening, and if someone is struggling right now with their mental health, can you expound on that a little bit and kind of help with providing some strategies in regards to what can they do if they've been through something traumatic, just like yourself, or even worse, or just even thinking in that space, I've done something, but not as equivalent, but I'm in that space right now. What are some strategies and some things that they could do right now to take action?
One, find somebody to talk to, even if it's a close friend, it's a family member. Those people in your life will tend to be the ones you trust the most. If there's someone you do really trust, talk to them, right? And try to get that out and try to start communicating it. Trying to get an understanding for yourself. When you verbalize something, you can start to analyze, okay, where am I really at? What do I really need? What is it I'm battling with? If it's partly guilt, right? Or like in my case, it could be feeling guilty that I killed somebody, right? Even though it wasn't my fault. But then the more we talked, the more we realized I didn't kill him intentionally. He was committing suicide. Then you discover those things as you start to talk. Second piece is I'm assuming within most countries, there are call lines you can use to communicate with somebody right away. Like we have 811, you have 911, this is the emergency. But for us, there's also 811, which is a medical line. There's also 211, which we use in Canada for contacting somebody as a counselor where you just need help and you want to talk to somebody. And they're all trained to help you. So it's the big key is you can't sit by yourself in your house with a bottle in your hand, right? Turning to drugs, turning to alcohol, turning into doing things with are self-destructive really doesn't help you. It's not going to make the pain go away. That's what people are trying to do. They're trying to medicate to get the pain to go away. That ultimately is not going to work, right? All it's going to do, because alcohol is a depressant, makes it worse. And even in cases where you drink too much alcohol to the extreme, you get so depressed and it's already added to the emotion you already have. That's when it's dangerous and people get suicidal. So it's avoiding the substance abuse piece, avoiding the self-destruction, and really trying to reach out and get help as best you can. Right.
Being a life coach, I presume that you come across many different people from all walks of life, and knowing that you're actually focusing, working on men and some of the kids that's in school, right? What are some key strategies that you work with some of these clients or work with some of these people on, or what are some of the like principles that you try to like teach them, so that it could be some core value types of things that are some key takeaways that after they finish working with you or after they hear you on stage, they could say, all right, cool, I understood his story, I understand his principle, I understood his framework, I can start applying this within my life.
Yeah. One of the things that you need to do is be gentle with yourself and understand that how you treat yourself is going to be one of the biggest keys. It's not so much what other people are going to be doing. If you can't look yourself in the mirror and give yourself a high five, you're starting off from a bad starting point. Something as simple as that, as weird as it may seem, being in a mirror and be able to talk to yourself saying, I am okay. I am all right. I am loved. I am respected. All these positive affirmation pieces, saying it to yourself in a mirror is a really good starting point. And then giving yourself a high five that today I am going to be okay. Today I will get through the day. And you simply give yourself a high five right in the mirror, right? It's that whole mental talk to yourself. You can be your own doctor per se, right? Where it's a self-help sort of mentality, where I follow somebody like Robbins, not Tony Robbins, the other Robbins, where that's where it comes from. The high five habit comes from her in one of her books, right? Mm-hmm. It's Mel Robbins.
Yeah.
So with doing something like that, I found that helped a lot, especially the whole mindset piece of talking to myself with affirmations and not digging into the negative. You need to avoid the negative talk and the negative spin your brain always keeps doing. Right. So a lot of the stuff that I teach, like the meditation, the affirmations, trying to get into journaling, all of that is self-help pieces that keep you in a positive mindset to try to move forward. If you stay in a negative mindset and you constantly have that spin, your brain will take that spin and it will accelerate it. And you'll start thinking the craziest stuff. After my accident, I had the thoughts in my head of, people are going to label me a killer. I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to end up in jail. I'm going to lose my kids. I'm going to be unemployed. How much of that is actually true? Actually, none of it.
None of it.
All of it came from me have that spin in my head that starts and it just accelerates. So you've got to cut that off and start flipping that script and stay on a positive mindset all the time. Use the affirmations, using your meditation, using your daily routine, even something during the day, what I call perspective, that teach people this. Somebody cuts you off in traffic. What's your first reaction? You get mad, you flip them the bird, you honk your horn. Okay. Now
that's typical down here in South Florida.
it's very typical, right? So how about flipping that around? Okay. You were the one who just cut somebody off because you're so distracted because you're having a really bad day. You're in the middle of a divorce. You're going to lose half of everything as a guy, etc. Or in my case, my accident. And I flip the script and go, I got really distracted because I'm having a bad time. I accidentally cut you off. Didn't mean to. And I'm suddenly getting honked at. I'm getting yelled at. The guy's tailing me now. What does that do to me? So if you flip that script and you're the person who just got cut off, what I started doing is going, it's okay, and let it go.
Yeah.
Why? You're not helping yourself and you're not helping them because you don't know what their life is like. They don't know yours, right? It triggered me to get pissed off right away. But at the same time, it's like my reaction adds to my fuel for my pissed off, my anger management. And it also puts them possibly in a detriment because maybe they're not having such a great day. Maybe they're having an even worse day than you, but you don't know that.
Absolutely,
so that perspective piece helps a lot, right?
Absolutely. I used to work at the Miami VA hospital, and veterans come through there all the time in the hospital when I was working there. And one day, a veteran was there for an appointment, and he was having a really bad day. And another veteran came there, and they got into a traffic issue. And the other veteran flipped the other veteran the bird, and the other veteran had a gun in the car, and he killed him.
Yep.
That's how serious it could be.
Yep. That's all it takes is that one trigger to trigger somebody else into a bad state to a terrible state, right?
Absolutely, man.
Exactly.
So looking ahead, man, can you talk a little bit about like what are some of your goals and what are some of your aspirations in regards to the profession as you're getting into it and you're trying to make an impact, man? What's next for you?
One of the bigger things that I've looked at, especially being a male and going through what I went through and then trying to get help and realizing there are no support groups in my city. My city's about 270,000 people, not big by any means, but even within my province, I've only found 2 men's groups and they're not here. So one of the things I'd like to do is to start a men's group, use my experience to try to help other men to start to learn how to communicate, learn how to talk about their emotions and not bury it so much and try to get more and more out there with this message that it's okay to not be okay. Right? It's the whole mental health stigma from our society, especially from a man's perspective, where we've been told for how many centuries that bury it. No, you're a man. Suck it up. You're supposed to be the leader of the family. No, men don't cry. I've lost count of the number of times I've been in tears because of my accident. Right? It's just you get overwhelmed, and it has to come out, and it helps with that release to be able to get through it, and trying to get men to understand it is okay, right? And then just keep building my speaking tour to help pair with that, and get into schools. I come from a high school environment where I taught high school for 16 years. So for me to deal with kids is great. One of my coaching clients was 15 years old, and I helped her, a 15-year-old girl. I helped her get through some of the anxiety and stress that she's dealing with, right? So I've got some experience with that. So getting into schools is great. I'd love to be able to talk to kids, talk to men, do more of that, get onto bigger stages, start doing conferences to get the message out and do the best I can just to make a difference. Take something really shitty that happened to me and turn it into something good.
Most definitely, man. And I applaud you for that, man. I got one more question here before we get up out of here, man. And you just said it, so I have to ask you. On your journey during your transformation, can you talk a little bit about how important it is to having the right people around you when it comes to a community or support? And I say that because you could easily have someone that's negative around you which creates a negative mindset and could bring you back to where you was at before.
Yeah.
And you did not allow that to happen to you. So can you talk a little bit about the importance of having the right people in your circle? So if you're having a bad day, or if you're having a good day, or you just feel a certain way, to have the right people in your corner for you.
Yeah. Really important. It's not just looking at it from a professional help sort of standpoint. It's not just counselors. Now, you'll have people who are, for example, a life coach like me, where I'd be on speed dial for anybody who really needs it. It's not a problem. But because I cost money from having given a service, some people will be very reluctant to reach out. So they need a network of friends, family that they can rely on. And one of the things I tell people very bluntly is that don't be afraid to stop talking to those who cause you the greatest angst. Somebody who's constantly telling you, look, just suck it up. How come you're not over this by now? That sort of mentality for people who don't understand isn't going to help you in your recovery. Don't be
Mm.
afraid to simply tell them, you need to stop what you're doing. It's not helping me. If you can't do that, you and I will not talk. It's as simple as that. Look out for your own mental health and don't allow others to have a negative impact on you. I've got somebody I've been talking to as a client who runs into that exact problem. She has family members that simply can't stop with the negative stuff. And she's gotten to the point where she's going to have to put her foot down, put a boundary and say, enough. Because I can't deal with having always the same issue over and over again and being dragged down because of your belief that isn't mine. Right. And it's simply having to do the boundary and you don't have a choice. And return to those who do boost you up and put you in the right mindset every day.
Absolutely. And before we get out of here, man, can you share with our audience some lessons that they could take away from your story?
Resiliency, being resilient and not giving up. People who tend to go into a shell and they start to turn to alcohol and find other ways to dull in pain, they're simply trying to find an escape from a reality they don't want to deal with. That doesn't help. Reach out to somebody like me. You don't know me. I'm not going to judge. I've been through my own personal hell and backs, same as that you have, Michael. People could reach out to you easily and just say, I just need somebody to talk to, somebody with some advice. Yeah, by all means, reach out to those that you've run into. Like, the universe will put people in your path
Most
that
definitely.
you need to be able to get through what you're going through. It's just a matter of be aware of them and reach out. Don't be afraid to reach out. It's that fear that tends to stop most people, and then they self-medicate and they self-destruct. Don't be afraid. Don't let the fear hold you back. There's people like myself who fully understand where you are and are not going to judge you, are going to do everything we can to help you get through.
So if anybody wanted to work with you or book you on their podcast or call you up for a conference or any of that, where can they find you, man?
Yeah. Driving Out of Darkness is the name of my book, but it's also the name of all my social media channels: Instagram, TikTok, my page on Facebook, my fan page. And I've also got drivingoutofdarkness.com, which also has a contact form on it. It's actually linked with my book. There's actually some bonuses for my book that are on there, but there's also a contact form. So I can get a hold of me on messaging through any of those channels. Not a problem. I'm not hard to find online if you use my name. My number's out there. My email's out there. I'll talk to anybody who wants help. Like, by all means, get in touch with me. I'll help as best I can. If I can't help you, I will find someone who can. I know I have enough contacts. I can find somebody.
Hey, Jacques, thank you so much, brother, for being a guest on this show, man. I truly applaud you for being totally vulnerable with your story and transparent. And I totally agree with you, man. Like some of these things, when it occurs to us as men, we mask it and don't talk about it. So I just want to tell you, thank you so much for coming on and being a guest, man.
Well, thanks, Michael. It's been a blast. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Guys, make sure if you like this episode to leave a comment. Make sure you share it with a family or a friend, as we also know that people out there are struggling. People are dealing with some tough things at this tough time that we got going on in this world. Until next time, God bless.
Sorry. Can't complain at all. Couple dollars in my pocket, know it come and go. Been working on my body, getting healthier. Thank God for clarity.